And we'll wrap up totally and talk about Manchester United, Pete, because Dan Ashworth has been announced as the sporting director. Are we expecting their transfer activity now to properly get underway? And what will it mean for the club now that he's joined?
Yeah, it means there's a bit of clarity now on what's going on at Manchester United. We all knew that Ashworth was the number one target that United and Ineos were looking to bring in to sort of begin this restructuring of the recruitment side of things at Old Trafford. So good news for United that they finally got that deal over the line with Newcastle to bring in Ashworth. Yeah, he's a smooth operator, Dan Ashworth, highly respected as well for the jobs that he's done with West Brom, Brighton, also with England as well when he worked with Gareth Southgate. And obviously he did a decent job at Newcastle in the short time that he was there. So yeah, I think he's a steady pair of hands, and he'll be there to ensure that United don't sort of make so many more mistakes in the transfer market, which they have done in recent years. They've spent a lot of big money on players, and a lot of those deals haven't worked out at all. So, but I think for Ashworth right now, I think it'll be a case of coming in, looking at the whole squad, the whole setup of Manchester United, and analysing where United can maybe offload players, because I think for Jim Ratcliffe right now, it's about cutting costs and saving money at Old Trafford. It's not about spending money. So I don't think there'll be much spending at Old Trafford until players move on. So I think that'll be the key for Dan Ashworth right now, is to offload any players that are not part of the plans going forward, and maybe then using that to reinvest in the squad. So yeah, he's got a tough job in his hands, because United are playing catch up right now against the rest of the rivals.
Who could go then, Pete, this summer to sort of raise funds and that transfer kitty for Erik ten Hag to reinvest? Who's likely to leave Old Trafford?
Well, two names that we fully expect to leave Old Trafford this summer is Jadon Sancho, which is no surprise considering his fallout with Erik ten Hag. Now, ten Hag is staying at Old Trafford and signing a new deal. I don't see any way back for the winger at Old Trafford, so I think United would definitely be open to offers for him to leave, and they could command a decent transfer fee for him, but they will make a loss on him. There's no doubt about that. They spent over £70 million on him when they signed him from Dortmund, and they had to loan him back there last season following that bust up with Ten Hag. So he'll be one player I would imagine will be heading towards the exit door again. And then Mason Greenwood, who had a good season for Getafe last season in La Liga. There's a lot of interest in him with the likes of Lazio, Juventus, Marseille, all interested in him as well. So he's another player that seemingly doesn't have a long-term future at Old Trafford. So United will definitely look to sell those two. And then again, I think they could be open to offers for a number of players in that squad if they want to raise funds. There's been talk that Harry Maguire potentially could be allowed to go if the right offer came in for him. Victor Lindelof is entering the final year of his contract as well, so he could potentially leave. Wan-Bissaka is in a similar situation. If the right offer came in for him, I think United wouldn't stand in his way to let him move on. So yeah, big summer ahead at Old Trafford. I think there'll be a lot of outs and a few ins as well.
Looking at those defenders, Paul, Wan-Bissaka and Harry Maguire, how much are they worth in today's market? What would United, do you think, be interested in accepting potentially if offers are to come in?
Well, I mean, you look at the ages of the two players there. That's what goes against them. You look at the recruitment, and a lot of recruitment nowadays is done on data and analysis. And players' ages. You look at Chelsea recruitment policy. There's certainly not two players that would interest Chelsea because of their age. It's hard to put a value on players until you know what teams are interested. It would be difficult to imagine Maguire playing in the Premier League for another team. You would expect there may be an interest from, I don't know, there may be an interest from the Saudi Pro League. There may be an interest from other leagues in Europe for those types of players. But it's a one to watch Manchester United, isn't it? Because the 250 jobs that they're reportedly cutting behind the scenes, people not wanting to go into the office. If you believe what you read, people wanting to work from home. And so Jim Ratcliffe on what looks like a cost-cutting exercise at the moment, then that listen, I know we're talking about players, but then that begs the question, is that the reason they've kept the manager? Because they did an end-of-season review with the manager after they'd interviewed 3 other people. Surely you do an end-of-season review with the manager first, then make a decision as if you need to go and interview other people. It seems like they've done it a different way around. The current manager that they had was seemingly the last one that they wanted to keep. Recruitment-wise, they're linked with, I think it's De Ligt, isn't it? The centre-half, they're linked with the Dutch centre-half. So is that the manager having a little bit more say in Dutch players that he wants to come in the similar way that he had before? Or is that Dan Ashworth, Jason Wilcox, their influence with players like that coming in? It's an interesting time at Manchester United as to see who does come in and who's allowed to leave. Listen, Maguire's one that obviously hasn't always seen eye to eye with the manager. He's not always played, so that's one that you could understand. For Saka, I think he's played well this season. I think defending-wise, I think he's a decent defender one-on-one. I'd be surprised if they let him go. Mason Greenwood, Jadon Sancho will be players that they do look to move on. And it looks like Erik ten Hag's won that battle, doesn't it, between him and Jadon Sancho? The club have favoured the manager over the player. Still not convinced on Ten Hag. If I was a betting man, I'd have a few quid on him not been there by Christmas.
Well, to help them potentially with that cause, Pete, we know that Anthony Martial has left the club on a free transfer. Are we expecting another number 9 through the door this summer? And are there any particular targets that United could be looking at this summer?
Yeah, I definitely think a number 9 is a priority for United. We know, as you said, Martial has moved on. They want a striker to support Rasmus Højlund following Martial's release. Joshua Zirkzee of Bologna does seem to be the preferred choice for United to fit into that striking role as well. He's got a release clause of around 40 million euros, which is 33 million pounds, which is not bad value for the player as well, and it would definitely be within United's price range to try and sign him. Also, Bologna are pretty convinced that he will move on as well. I think their director was saying that 99.9% he was sure that Zirkzee would move on this summer. Again, a very talented young player. He had a good season for Bologna last year. I think he got 12 goals in 37 games. Them qualified for the Champions League last season. Another player that Ten Hag will be aware of. He's a Dutch international. He's been away at the Euros with the Netherlands. Hasn't played any minutes as yet after being a late call as well. But yeah, he's a good young player. There's been a lot of interest in him from AC Milan as well. But United are hopeful that they can convince the player to leave Italy and make that move to the Premier League. And again, a young player with potential who could provide a good foil to Rasmus Højlund. And as I said, I think for the price, he looks good value.
And to wrap up totally, Paul, we've seen an ongoing issue with United trying to sign Jean-Claire Todibo, but they can't, of course, due to the multi-club ownership rules. Does Sir Jim Ratcliffe have the right to be frustrated with that situation? And could we potentially see the rules changing to favour clubs in a multi-club ownership circle?
Does that then give the clubs an unfair advantage? It's a tricky question. That's murky water. Obviously, they're going to be frustrated that they can't do that. I think Pete's probably a lot more qualified to answer that question than me on the multi-club ownership and the rules. But from a trading point of view, if it gives certain clubs an unfair advantage, then it's not one that's going to be looked favourably if it goes to a vote with other clubs that aren't in that kind of setup, is it? So the multi-club ownership, yeah, it does work when you're putting younger players out or you're getting players, you wanting them to get experience elsewhere. You're trading players within your own setup to give players experience, to give them game time, etc. But when it comes to trading, it's a grey area.
Go on, Pete. You can give us your conclusion then on that ongoing situation.
Yeah, it's definitely a grey area, that one. I think obviously you'd need to know that you're getting full transfer value for that player, then the clubs aren't overpaying for certain players or underpaying, like lowballing them because they know they're owned by the same club as well, and as part of this multi-club ownership as well. I can see why Sir Jim Ratcliffe is frustrated. He wants to bring a player that he's well aware of from Nice, who he also owns, and he obviously Todibo has been a target for United for a while now. So I think obviously again it's going to be another situation a bit like PSR. Things are probably going to have to change. These rules are going to have to change because more and more clubs now have got this multi-club partnership going on with several clubs across Europe as well. So I don't think it should prevent Man United making a move for Todibo as long as his true market value is met and there's no obviously sort of cooking of the books or anything like that going on, because then they will raise serious questions, which again there's been questions raised by the Premier League during the summer transfer window with some of the deals going on between those clubs who have been trying to comply with PSR. So yeah, it's a grey matter. It's something that probably needs to be resolved long term, and I'm sure it's something that UEFA and FIFA will be looking into because it's becoming more and more prevalent that more and more clubs are going down this multi-club route.
You've just watched a segment from Football Insider's brand new podcast, The Inside Track, with me, Lewis Pearce, alongside the guests on the show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like, comment your thoughts on the topic, and feel free to share on your social media pages. If you want to listen to the full podcast episode, click the link in the description below. Keep your eyes peeled for plenty more content and exclusives here on The Inside Track.